teaching the children about their background, their culture, about the Blackfeet people has always been a passion of mine and a passion of many of the Blackfeet teachers that are in the district. One of the things we realized that we were lacking is resource and reference material, particularly written material that we could use for producing lessons that children could read, teachers could use as references. So that's something that we've always been looking for, watching for, trying to produce ourselves. And about so in March of last year, Mr. Adolf Hungry Wolf came into my office. He had been referred by Sin Kip and said that he wanted to sell his books that he had written, the Blackfoot Papers. We were familiar with the collection. We had, in fact, purchased a set for every school building, and so we were well aware of their value as reference material and their value as historical archive.
I'm Adolf Hungry Wolf. This is my grandson Cassius Hungry Wolf. I am the guy who is responsible, for better or worse, for these things called the Blackfoot Papers. I've been interested in Western history since I was a boy. I have my degrees from university in history. I wrote my first articles and books back when I was in high school on Western history, mostly on railroad history. Also, since I was a boy, I've been intrigued by Native culture in general. And by the time I got old enough to know the difference, somehow I was attracted to the Blackfeet Nation, Blackfoot Confederacy. When I graduated from high school, I was already working, as I said, on some railroad history books. I was lucky enough to run into a box of old photographs at an auction that turned out to be photographs of the Blackfeet. I didn't know that at the time when I got them, because most of the photos didn't have anything written on the back, which is pretty common for old photos. So I had these old photos, and in about 1967, through a long story that I won't get into right now, I ended up here in Browning, Montana at the North American Indian Days. Had with me some of those photos and got to meet a couple of old people and showed them those photos, and was pleasantly surprised at how excited they were to see those photos and to find people that they knew in the photos. And that got me to thinking, gee, maybe I'll look for some more old photos of the Blackfeet and put together another book like the one I was working on. The one I was working on was called Rails No Mother Load, some railroads in California. So I thought I'll do the same for the Blackfeet. And the railroad book had taken me maybe about 4 years to complete. And so I thought, this was 1962 when I graduated from high school. I thought 3 or 4 years and I'll have this book completed. So that was a while back. And a few things, what did they say? A lot of water's gone under the bridge since. It actually took me 40 years instead of 4 years to gather this material, to gather these photos. In the process, I went to every kind of museum and archive and so forth that I could think of in North America, a bit in Europe. Wherever I could find the photos, antique stores, second-hand stores, antique auctions. And I put those photos into albums, and I numbered them, and I got to know more and more of what nowadays is called elders, although in the past the old people just called themselves the old people. They never said elders. I went to these different elders as I got to know them and showed them the pictures, and invariably they would say, there's my aunt, and this one's my cousin, and oh, there's me and my little brother, and etc. And I had a notebook where I'd write down picture number 123, so-and-so says this is so-and-so. And little by little, that little notebook grew thicker and thicker, and it became one of my prized possessions. And one of the things I'm most happy about with these books is that so often you find a stack of old photos of any kind of subject, but especially of Native people. You find a stack of old photos, and you're intrigued by all the scenes in them, and you haven't got a clue what they show or who they show. And if you go around nowadays in the year 2011 and you show them to people, they're going to say, gee, a bunch of old Indians, but we don't know who they are. And I was fortunate when I started this project in the 1960s. I worked on it steadily through the 1970s, that there were still people living who had been born towards the end of the buffalo days. In fact, the main inspiration I had at that time, old Jim Whitecalf, was actually the last person who hunted buffalo and who took a scalp on a war trail. Those are the kind of people I met with, and I was fortunate that they could look through these photos and give me names. And as I was starting to say, what I consider one of the most valuable things in these books is that there are a couple thousand photos, mostly identified, mostly with names of people whose descendants are alive and well on the Blackfeet Reservation today. But if I was to show them this picture and didn't say who it was, I'd say, "Who's this?" They would say, "I don't know." I would say, "That's your great-great-grandfather." And I've done this many times in the last few years. And since these books have come out, lots of people have come up to me and said, "Gee, I finally found out where we got our family name from. I've never seen a picture of the original, whoever it was." I won't name names because once I start, we could spend a lot of time naming names here. So I started putting these photos together with what I could look up in books, what I could do in research, what I could look up from Clark Whistler, Walter McClintock, so on and so forth, James Willard Schultz. And I put that together with what the old people were teaching me, and little by little, instead of it being a book and work, it turned into my life. I ended up becoming married into the Blood Tribe, which is a division of the Blackfoot Confederacy. I became, with my wife and my family, we became the keepers of a Thunder Medicine Pipe bundle. I've now been twice the keeper of one of those, of a Beaver Medicine bundle, of several painted lodges, many other things that were transferred to me and explained to me. This all kind of grew out of what was originally just going to be a 4-year book project. So on it went, and the more I worked on it, the more the people I went to visit, the old people, always said, "You know, our kids in school get all kinds of access to all kinds of history and information, and when they're out of school, they get all kinds of published material, comic books and dirty books, as the old people called them, that they don't learn anything out of. What we need are books about our own people, about our own history and culture. We need books that our kids can get hold of." And a lot of these famous books, like the ones I mentioned, Ewers and Whistler, those are often hard to find. They're at a university library or in a collector's corner for books, but to actually have them at hand where the young people are, that's tough to find. So instead of that, I've got these 4 volumes. It took me 4 years, after the 40 years of research, it took me 4 more years to assemble them into these 4 books. I had to stick my neck way out to get them published. What was going to be a tribute to a culture that was dying out, which is what all the old people said. Instead, to me, these books have become sort of a guidebook to the young people who have been busily reviving our culture. One of those young people is sitting right here, my grandson, so I'm happy that his ancestors are in here and that he's getting to look through these himself. Isn't that right? And what do you think of these books, my wife?
Excellent.
Had a lot of real good things in common. He knows a lot of history. He studied with a lot of elderly people over at Canada, and also here on the Blackfeet Reservation. He met people and had a good relationship with the Blackfeet here. And my grandmother and all those old people at that time thought a lot of him. When he began talking about writing books and telling me about the pictures, I encouraged him. And I told him, well, that will be just that's an immense project to take on. But through the years, he took pictures. He interviewed a lot of the elderly people that were still alive at that time, which was real good information, because now we can see the fruits of all that labor. The students nowadays, and other people as well, adults, knowing and seeing pictures of their family and hearing history that, that they didn't really know much about, and he took it all down, and now it's here. It's here for the people and all these young students to get acquainted with this work. It was a master achievement as far as I'm concerned.
And it's going to help them. And there's a lot of people that want to know about our ways. These are the kinds of things I think people are trying to find out, and then we have it here.